So in the previous class, I explained you all what is an operating system, what are the functions of an operating system, and I explained you all about the different types of operating system, right? So today I'll be explaining you all the different structure of an operating system, okay? Okay. Yesterday I explained you all about the system call. So what is a system call? It is basically a mechanism that will provide the interface between a process and the operating system, okay? Now, suppose you want to or you need any services from an operating system. So how you are going to interact with an operating system? So for that, you have to use the system calls, okay? So through the system calls, okay, the application program will interact with the kernel, okay? And what is the kernel? Kernel is basically the heart of an operating system, okay? So how it's going to interact? It will interact through the API. API stands for Application Program Interface, okay? Now, the system calls are the only entry point for the kernel, because the kernel will understand only these functions, because these functions has been written or it has been provided in your operating system, okay? So you have to, in order to interact or if, in order to use the services of an operating system, you have to use this application program interface, okay? So here there was an example, like if you want to write a program that is going to read a data from one file and then it's going to copy it to some another file, okay? So first what you are supposed to do is you have to open a file, okay, and you have to read the data. Then you have to open the another file where you are going to save the data, okay? So for doing all these things, you need a service of an operating system, okay? And these all are being done with the help of system calls. Is it clear to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Next, there was an example or with the diagram that how the system call works. So step one, a process executes in a user mode. So this is a user mode and this is the kernel mode, okay? So your process is going to execute in a user mode, okay, till the time the system call will interrupt it. Now the next step is get the system call. The system call means interacting with the hardware as well as the kernel, okay? Now once the system call execution is over, the control returns to the user mode, okay? So now all the copying of the file is been done. So after finishing of this copying of the file, the control will return back to the user mode, okay? Now the execution of user process resumes in the kernel mode, okay? Now there are different types of system calls that I explained yesterday. Then there is a process control system call in order to create a process, in order to the process, okay, or in order to see the process IDs, okay, you have to use process control system calls. Now there is a file management system call which includes create file, read file, delete file, okay? In order to use these services, you have to use file management system calls. Then there is a device management system calls, like to request a device or in order to open a device, okay? If you want to read a device, and then finally if you want to unmount a device, for this you require this device management system calls. Now there is a system call which is basically used for an information, okay, like in order to get the current local time or get the local time. So for that you need to use this information maintenance system call, okay? Then there is a system call that is being used for a communication, which includes pipes, okay, in order to create a pipe, okay? Some more system calls are. So I explained you all about the different system calls which comes under process control, which comes under your file management, device management. Then there is an information maintenance system calls like get current process ID, you have to use the get PID. Then in order to get the system timer, you have to use an alarm. Then in order to sleep, you have to use this sleep method. Okay. Then for communication, there is a create pipe. Okay. So these are the different system calls that are being used. So during the practical session, I'll be using this system calls. Okay. Now, so today we'll see about the different system structures. Okay. So previously I explained you all about the different types of an operating system, but in today's class I'll be explaining you all about the different system structure of an operating system. Okay, so there are 5 designs of an operating system. So let's begin with the monolithic system. Then there is a layered system. Then there is a virtual machine. Then there is a microkernel, and the last one is the client server architecture. Okay. You are familiar with any one of these structure, students? Are you familiar with any one of these structure?
So virtual machines.
Yes. Can you tell me what is a virtual machine is all about?
So I heard about JVM.
Okay. What is it? Can you explain?
So it interprets the byte code into some machine into human readable codes.
Actually, what happens in Java? Java execution is of 2-stage process. Okay. So in the first stage, what happens? You are writing a source code, and the source code is being compiled, and after compiling, it creates a byte code. Okay. I'll just make a drawing and just since you are you told me about this byte code, I should explain. Okay, so Java execution is a 2-stage process. Okay, so this is compilation. So here what happened? I'll just make it simple. Okay, so is it clear now? So as I told you all that execution of a Java program is a two-stage process. Okay, it is known as a two-stage process. So what does it mean? See, in the first stage, what happens? It's called a compilation stage. So here, the program that you are writing here, okay, that is known as the source code. Okay, so after that, you have to compile this using Java C, your file name dot Java. Okay, and after you press enter, it will compile your program from top to bottom. If there is any error, then it is going to reflect it. If it is not, if there is no error, then what it's going to do, it will generate a byte code. Is it clear? Now this byte code you cannot run directly. Now in the second stage, what happens? This byte code will be the input for this stage. Okay, and here it takes the input as a byte code, and then it's going to interpret. So in the second stage, what you are writing your file name dot Java or Java file name. Okay, and then it is going to generate a machine code. Now that machine code is an executable code. Is it clear? So this Java is Java compilation and execution is a two-stage process. Okay. So I was telling you all about this 5 different types of So 5 different types of operating system structure. Okay. So what are those? So first one is a monolithic design. Then there is a layered system, and then there is a virtual machine, microkernel, and your client server. See, in the monolithic design, you can see that in the bottom layer there is a ROM BIOS device driver is there, and on top of that there is an MS-DOS device driver. And on top of MS-DOS device driver, there is a resident system program. And finally, there is an application program. Okay. So here this resident system program as well as an application program directly interact with your ROM BIOS. Okay. And so here only 1 or 2 level of code is there in case of monolithic design. It's a very simple structure and do not have a well-defined structure. Okay, so this is only the final structure. Now the Unix only has a limited structure, that is your kernel and the system program, and everything between the system calls interface and the physical hardware is the kernel one. Okay, so this is the architecture design of a monolithic system. Here, the application program directly interact with the ROM BIOS or the device driver. If there is any resident program is required because these are the program that is been used by the operating system. Okay, so directly also it is going to use this ROM BIOS. Okay, so this is an architecture or MS-DOS structure. Okay. Next, there is a layered structure. In this layered structure, you can see that at the bottom there is a hardware, and on top of bottom there is a processor, and above this processor there is a virtual machine. Above virtual machine there is an input and output device, and above this input and output is communication, and then there is a file system. So these together is known as a supervisor mode, and on top of that there is a user mode. Okay. So here what happens, the lower level is independent of the upper layer. Okay, so this lower level is independent. Okay, whatever the things is been done in an upper layer, there is no connection. Okay, the operating system is broken down into a number of layers or levels, each on top of the lower level. Okay, lower layer. Each layer is an implementation of an abstract object, that is encapsulation of a data and operations that can manipulate this data. Okay. Now, what does it mean is an abstract object. Each layer is an implementation of an abstract object. Okay. Now, do you know about what is an abstraction in Java? Anyone? Abstraction means the act of representing an essential features without including background details. Okay. So here, how this process or this virtual machine is being implemented, it has got means it's not known by this input and output device. Okay, only the output from this virtual machine will be taken as an input to this input and output device. But other than that, how it is being implemented in this stage, that is not concerned of this stage. Okay. And next thing is the abstract object, that is encapsulation of data and operation that can manipulate this data. That means what? That whatever the function is there in this stage, it has been encapsulated, okay, within the data. Are you getting it? Hello.
Sir, repeat once again.
Therefore, at the bottom of this layered structure, there is an hardware, and on top of hardware, there is a process, and above that, there is a virtual machine, and above virtual machine, there is an input and output device, the communication, and the file system. So together, it's a supervisor mode, okay? And this architecture is known as a layered system architecture, okay? So whatever the things that is been implemented in this process state has got nothing to do with this virtual machine state. Whatever is implemented in a virtual machine state has got nothing to do with an input and output state. Only the input of this means the output of this one will be an input of the above layer. Okay, because every just see each layer is an abstraction. Okay, whether any data is there, any data or a method is there, that is been encapsulated. Okay, so that it is not been visible from the other layer. And on top of that, there is an user layer. See, the bottom layer or layer 0 is the hardware. The main advantages of the layer approach is the modularity. Okay, so whatever the task is there, it is been divided into a different functions or a module. Now, have you understood this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Next, the continuation of a layered structure, that the lowest layer is the process management. Okay. Now, each layer only use the operation that is being provided by the lower layer and does not have to know their implementation. As I told you all, whatever the implementation is there in a process level, it is not concerned of this virtual machine layer. Okay. Only the output of the process will be layer will be an input to this layer. Other than that, how these processes are being maintained in this layer, it has got nothing to do in this layer. Is it clear? Each layer hides the existence of a certain data structure, operations, and hardware from higher level layer. So the same thing, how this communication is being done, it has got nothing to do with this file system. Okay, so every layer is an abstraction of the above layer. You are going at home and you are just switching on the TV, right? You have got nothing to do how the inner circuit is going to work inside your TV. Okay, you have got a remote control. You know there is some buttons are there that if you press this button, then there will be like a channel will be means change, okay, or the volume will be increased or decreased. But how internally it is been implemented, you have got nothing to do with that, right? So that is known as an abstraction. Okay. समझ में आया सबको?
Yes, sir.
Next,
Sir.
this is the virtual machine. So previously also I have explained you all that in your machine you can use a dual boot system. So if you are using a dual boot system, then what happens? Physically, you are in installing two different types of operating system, right? So what happens? What are the problems that we see if you are using a dual boot system is that your one of the operating system easily get corrupted. Okay, so you cannot use the other one. Okay, or frequently it gets corrupted. Okay, so there is an option that is known as a virtual machine. Okay, so here a virtual machine is a virtual representation or it's an emulation or a emulator, okay, of a physical computer. A virtual machine or a virtualization makes it possible to create a virtual machine, each with their own operating system and application on a single physical machine. So here in this case, in this diagram, you can see that if your machine has been installed with a single operating system, then it will look similarly like this. Okay, that there is an hardware, then there is a kernel of an operating system, and then there is a processor. Okay, but if you have installed any software or any virtualization software, okay, like so many softwares are available these days. One of the famous one is the VMware, okay, and the another one is here. Um, the another is provided by the Oracle one, that is VirtualBox. Okay, so what you're supposed to do, you have to install that software and then you have to use an image or a CD of an operating system, and then you can install it out there. Okay, so on top of your actual operating system, there is an virtual machine that has been created, which is not an actual machine, but virtually it has been created. Okay, so that you can test different types of operating system on a single system. It is much more reliable than installing a dual operating system. Okay. Now, a virtual machine or VM is a software between your kernel and a hardware. Okay. Now, thus, virtual machines provide all functionalities of a CPU and the software simulation. Now, in case of any research or if you want to test some operating system, so in that case, you will not be able to like format your system and you will install that particular device operating system. Okay, so instead of formatting your system and again you're installing it from the scratch, so what you can do is you can easily install either VMware or the VirtualBox, and on that VirtualBox you can install any operating system that you want. Okay, I gave you an assignment also. Okay, so in that assignment there are different links are there of a different version of a Linux. What you are supposed to do, you install VirtualBox, and on top of that VirtualBox you install the operating system or the Linux operating system based on your system requirement. Okay, if you are having a less memory, then you install an operating system, Linux operating system, takes a very less number of less RAM, okay, or less resources, and you can test that. Okay, that is an hands-on practice. You have to practice it of your own. Now, does the VMware or the virtual machine provide all the functionalities of a CPU with a software simulation? Okay? The user has an illusion that he or she has the real processor that can run a kernel. Have you used virtual machine? Anyone? Just unmute yourself and tell me. Bhaskar Rai?
No, sir.
Yes. Have you used or not?
No, sir. No.
I'm not getting it.
No, sir.
No, okay. So what you can do is today you install VirtualBox, okay, and after that I send you a link. Okay, it's there in an assignment. You just click on that link. You'll get different Linux versions which are freely available. You download the images of those or any of the Linux operating system, and you just try to install in your computer. Okay. Now, this is an example of a microkernel. See, in this microkernel, there is an hardware, and on top of the hardware, there is a microkernel. And all the services that are being required by the user process, okay, it is not there in the microkernel. Okay. Now, the operating system builds from many user level processes, okay, because these are the user level processes that are been required in order to run the user processes, okay. Like you need a process server, you need a virtual memory, you need a file system, you need a device driver, as well as you need a client process and some more services that you required, okay, from an operating system. So only absolute essential core function should be in the kernel. So in case of this microkernel, only the important things, okay, like your security and some other things, okay, protection, those things are there in a microkernel, and rest of the things are being used in a user process area, okay. Now, less essential services are and applications are built and run in a user mode. So these things are all there in a user mode, okay. Many functions that were in a traditional operating system becomes external subsystem, okay. So in different structure, you'll see that these are the services which are basically the core implemented in the core operating system, okay. But here you'll see that these things are being implemented in a user mode, okay. So in many functions that were in the traditional operating system becomes an external subsystem that interact with the kernel and with each other. Okay? The main function of a microkernel is to provide a communication facility between the client program and the various services. So what is the main task of this microkernel? To provide a communication between these services, okay, to the client program, okay. The communication is provided by message passing. Okay, so message passing system is there. An operating system will come see in this in an upcoming classes. Okay, so here also in case of a microkernel, it is being using a message passing system. So where this message is being passed from one module to the another module. Okay, and in a message passing system, there is a place where the message is being stored or message is being placed, and the layer which needs this message will take it from that particular area. Okay, so that is an example of a message passing system. Okay, we'll see in upcoming classes. Now next is your client server architecture. See, in this client server architecture, there is a machine that is known as a client, okay, which can be your any devices. It can be a laptop, it can be a desktop, or it can be a mobile or PDA, anything. And then there is a device that is known as a server. So what is the role of this client and what is the role of a server? The client always requests for any services from this server. And what is the purpose of the server? The purpose of the server is to serve or to provide information or provide the resources to this client. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In a client server computing, the client requests the resources and the server is always there to provide that resource. Okay. In case of internet also, like suppose you are writing www.google.com or any other website. So your machine is acting as a client machine, and through internet, you are typing it in you are writing an URL. Okay. So URL of that particular machine is the server. Okay, so directly that request goes to the server and server responded with the necessary files, okay, that you are requesting. A server may serve multiple clients at the same time, like suppose a college website, okay. n number of users can open it at the same time. So there is a server where the website is being uploaded, and there can be an n number of clients who request for that particular page, and the page will be served by the server. Okay. Okay. A server may serve multiple clients at the same time, while a client is in contact with only one server. Both the client and the server usually communicate via a computer network, but sometimes they may reside in the same system. What does it say? That it is not like every time that your client and server is always on the internet. It can be your client and server can be in the same system also, where there is, like, suppose there is no internet. That can be a case. Okay. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The system call for establish a communication or a connection are sometimes different for the client and server, but both involve the basic construct of a socket. That means through socket, okay, we can easily communicate with the client and server. It is basically the socket programming you can easily do in your Java programming. Okay. So socket is a place or a port. Okay, the port is being opened, and from that port, the client can interact with the server as well as the server can respond to the client. Now, both process has to establish their own socket. The client has its own socket that has to be opened for a server to respond, and the server has to open a socket from where the client will request. Okay. Now, the steps that is involved in establishing socket in a client side are as follows: like create a socket with a socket method. Okay, that is basically the system call. Connect the socket to an address of a server using the connect system call. Okay. Then what happens? The send and receive data. So first you have to open this socket. Okay, using a socket system calls, and then you have to connect it with the system with whom you want to send and receive the data. Okay. Now there are a number of ways to do this, but simple way is to using the read method and the write method of a system call. Okay. Now server, what it does, so these are basically the steps that involve in establishing connection on the server side as follows. Okay. So server also this has to do the same thing, that is, it will also create a socket with the socket system calls, and now what it's going to do is it will bind the socket to an address using a bind system call. There has to be some address. Okay. Now for a server, socket on an internet, and address consists of a port number and the host machine. Okay. So what it binds? It will bind an address which consists of a port number as well as the host of the host machine. Okay. Now, what this server is going to do, it's going to listen for the connection, okay, using the listen system calls. So whenever it gets a connection, it will accept it. Okay. So accept a connection with the accept system calls. Now this calls basically typically blocks the connection until a client connects with the server. Okay. So after, see, first it has to open the system socket using a socket system calls, then it has to bind, okay, the address, that is an address which consists of a host machine name and the port number, and then it will wait for a client to respond. Okay, so when client will request, then it is going to listen from this listen system calls, and after it listens or after it receives any request, so it is going to accept it. Okay. And after that, it will send the data through this read and write system call. Are you getting it?
Yes, sir.
If you want, you can take a screenshot of it. Okay. Now, these are the steps. Okay. So this is the server machine and this is the client machine. Okay. So at first, the server will open a socket. Okay. That is and then it's going to bind, that is a well-known port. So it will provide a port number as well as it will provide the host number. Okay. Host ID. And then it's going to listen. Okay. It will listen for what? It is going to listen so that any client is requesting for any information or not. Okay, so it's going to listen. So after it receive any request, it's going to accept it. Okay, and it's going to block until the connection from the next from client. Okay. So there is a client machine. So in client machine also the client starts this socket. Okay, and then it will use this connect method. So this connection is being established using a three-way handshaking. So what is this three-way handshaking is all about? We'll be studying in the next semester in computer network. That is, it's a three-way process. That is the reason it's called a three-way handshaking. So in a three-way handshaking, what happens? In the first stage, this client will request and it will send a SYN packet. Okay, that it is going to request. So after the server receive that message, it will send back this client an acknowledgement. Okay, and then after it receive an acknowledgement, it will send again its acknowledgement or SYN packet. Okay, which means it has now established a connection. So in order to establish a connection, it will send a three packet, or a three packet is going to exchange between this client and this server. Okay, so that is the reason it's known as a three-way handshake. So after the connection has been established, now the client is going to write, or it will just request for a data, and this server is going to respond for that particular request that has been provided by the client. Okay, so now what will happen? This client is going, the server is going to respond to the client. Okay, so this process will continue, that requesting for a data and receiving a data, and after some times, or after it finishes its work, it's going to close the connection. Okay, so now this, so at the end, or while closing a connection, it will send a PIN packet. Okay, that is the finish of the means, or to discard this connection. Okay, and then it will close the connection. Okay, so that's all for today, and these are the assignments. Okay, that I've posted. You have to write this question and answer. Okay, and then you have to scan it, and then you have to submit it. Okay, no printout.
Sir, handwritten.
Yes, it should be
Okay, sir.
handwritten. Just a minute. I have to stop recording.